Morning, that is here. It's a gold top shootout. Harley Benton and vintage. Let's take a closer look and see what you get for your money. Maybe which one is better, if there is a better, or just which one you prefer. So, let me sit down for a moment and pick up the Harley Benton. You can stay there, Mr. Vintage, in the background. Let's move the camera back a tiny bit. Bear with me. Right, so, first thing to note, this is an SC400 GT gold top, and it doesn't cost as much as the vintage. The vintage is 2.5 times the cost. So arguably not a direct comparison. However, they're both gold tops and Les Paul type guitars. And that is what this little comparison is all about. So, what can I tell you about this Harley Benton? First of all, the body on this is a little bit thicker than the vintage, and it is heavier. This weighs 4.1 kilos, which is getting on for £9. It's heavy. The vintage weighs 3.5 kilos, which is what, about £8? Yes, it's lighter. Anyway, they've both got a curvy top, although this one, this arched top, maybe slightly more arched, possibly. They've both got a Tune-o-matic type bridge and the usual controls you'd expect on one of these sort of guitars. Although this is a gold top, this is a bit more. Is this more of a copper top? It doesn't look. It's not actually all that goldy. But Sam Black, the heavy-handed guitarist, who's very kindly one of my subscribers, he's got one of these. He plays it a lot and he loves it. On the back, they've both got a satin neck. This one is some sort of a paint finish, and they've both got a good access to the upper frets. In fact, when I pick up the vintage, in fact, let me just do that right now, you'll see that the body shapes are very, very similar indeed. Look, see at the top here, dips down slightly instead of going straight across. Obviously they can't be the same as Epiphone or Gibson's, so they have to be slightly different. On the back, although the neck joints are slightly different from one another, you can see the curvature, look, and they've both still got that sort of easier access to the upper frets. You get tulip style tuners on one and Grover types on the other. Obviously the vintage is more expensive and the tuners are better. They feel a lot like Grovers actually. These, a little bit notchy, but it stays in tune a lot better than you might think it would, really. In fact, I've just picked it up for the first time in, I don't know, several weeks, and it's more or less in tune still where it's been sat. So that's good. What do you get fretboard wise? This is Blackwood on here. They might have changed it now because this one's a couple of years old and this one is unknown. I think Palferro maybe. The neck profiles are very different to one another. The vintage is much flatter. It's like a very flat D shape, maybe even a U shape, and you've got what feels a bit more like a C on here, but it's a lot thicker, a lot chunkier. Those bodies together, a bit hard to tell on there, but the Harley Benton is thicker. One thing that was interesting, you may have, if you saw my video that I did about the vintage the other day, I noted that the tone pots act as volume knobs. They don't actually do anything with the tone. And weirdly, that's exactly the same with this Harley Benton. So I'd be interested to hear from Sam or anyone else who's got one of these Harley Benton gold tops, whether that's the case. Maybe have a check. Put the volume to wherever you want to on your Harley Benton, and then have a little play with the tone knob and just see what happens when you turn it down. Does it turn the volume down, or does the volume stay where it is and the tone actually just get darker? Because on this one, definitely doesn't. Same on the vintage. So I'm guessing that is some kind of wiring fault, or I don't know really, needs to be looked at. So that's a bit annoying. But anyway, as you can see, they're quite different shades of gold, but they both call themselves a gold top. So in terms of the overall construction on them, I mean, to be fair to the Harley Benton, really, it's not, it doesn't, to be honest, it doesn't feel like a huge amount in it. You know, the frets ends are okay on both. Okay, the tuners are a bit better on the on the Vintage, but is a more expensive guitar. The switch on this one is a bit iffy. It's not on the Vintage, but if you're someone who can have a tinker with things, it's not a massively expensive thing to change if you needed to. But I guess the two sort of important things really are the playability and perhaps the sounds that you get out of it. So just going to have just a gentle out. Oh, sorry, got a little cut on my finger in a very awkward place. I'm going to have just a few tones and just see what we think of that, comparison. Now I'm using a Spider Line 6 amp, which I've got to say is rubbish. I think it is. It's rubbish to me. The different presets, the crunch, the metal and the insane, absolutely unusable really. It sound like shite, terrible, not impressed in the slightest. You've got some phaser and other sort of things on it, but we're gonna have a little go on the clean channel and then go on the crunchy channel, which I say is just mud really. But anyway, so just on the neck, new string still bedding in, tiny bit out of tune, sorry. Even the preset for clean on this amp has got some wah wah wah. Sounds terrible. I suppose I could change it, but brings out nicely. Let's have a quick swap over. Put you there. Neck. Make sure the volume's set at the same. Nice, eh? That's warm. Pickup's a tiny bit higher on this one. Right, middle position on the clean whilst we're here. Quite twangy, almost a bit Telecaster-ish. That twang, twang. Put on. Wait. Middle. What volume was that one? I didn't check actually. That was up quite a bit higher on there. Harley Benton's pickups are, I think, a bit hotter, aren't they? These are supposed to be wound to how Joe Bonamassa likes his pickups. Whether they really are or not, who knows? But so they're not supposed to be the highest output. But yeah, the Harley Benton sounds nice, I think, doesn't it? Right, whilst I've got this one here on the bridge. Okay, Mr. Harley Benton. Let's get you back. You're on the bridge. Sorry, on the. done that. Sorry, what an idiot. It's not on the bridge. I think that sounds good. Right, this awful crunch channel. Oh, Jesus, man. Just sounds horrible. God knows what you can tell from that. I did a factory reset on this line 6, so that is what the what it's supposed to sound like from the get-go. Middle. Put that down. Pick this up. Middle. And the bridge. Sounds like fuzz, doesn't it? Right, so I'm quickly back on to Mr. Vintage, onto the bridge, and then turn down so it's about the same. Right, let's turn that off. So, what are my takeaways from this? Well, the first takeaway is, if you've got an amp that sounds fucking terrible and you put the fuzz on, they all sound the same. But, not all joking aside, I think the Harley Benton, as with a lot of Harley Benton guitars, punches above its weight, really, doesn't it? The QC on Harley Bentons is dodgy, as we all know. and so that is one thing to consider. But then again, the QC on vintage guitars is also dodgy, quite frankly. So yeah, that's one thing to note. I think the pickups on this vintage probably sound a little bit clearer and a bit less output. It's a little bit more articulate, but not a lot in it really. In terms of playability, I do prefer the vintage, I have to say. It just feels a bit nicer. The neck. The thing is with the Harley Benton, although it's a smooth neck on the back, it's sort of painted finish. It's got a strange perception of cheap feel to it. It'd almost be better if, I don't know, just using something else to finish it off with. But it's not bad at all. I think realistically, if you had, these are about 110, I think now, 100, something like 120 maybe from Thomann. These are about, well, at least 300 new for the vintage. So if it's a question of new for new and you're looking for an LP that's gold of some description and you don't want to spend too much money, I think the Harley Benton really makes more sense. The used market, these Harley Bentons are very similar to what they are new. I guess a lot of people don't want the hassle of ordering one from abroad, I suppose. But if you wanted a guitar that is perhaps a touch more articulate and a little bit nicer to play, then I think the vintage. And I think in terms of brand snobbery as well between the two, I mean, these Harley Benton, a lot of their guitars punch up to how good a vintage guitar is, despite the fact, you know, Wilkinson hardware, Wilkinson this, Wilkinson that. I think on the slightly more budget end of Harley Benton stuff, you get really good value for money. When you start paying a little bit more, because they have made their guitars better, you can pay like £250 English money now for an LP and for some of their other guitars. They're still very good value for what you get, but I think the problem is when you're starting to get into that £200 to £300 mark with Harley Benton, is you're starting to think, well, what other brands are there that will give me better resale, will give me more headstock snobbery if that's important to you, and just the perception of a better guitar. And I think that's one thing, isn't it, with any brand, any cheaper brands always have to overcome. It's a bit like Skoda in the car world, owned by the VW group these days, and they make very good cars. And I think the stigma of the brand has kind of diminished, and a lot more people go for it. But you're still, you're still faced with like for like, not that much in it really between getting a Skoda and a VW. And sadly, we're just conditioned, aren't we, to say we want the VW, which might be a little bit with your Harley Benton on the slightly more expensive guitars that they make. Even they get stainless steel frets with them and better pickups and all these sorts of things. You might be conditioned to thinking, I need to get an Epiphone or an Ibanez or or Squire even, or whatever. But I think down at this end of the range, the Harley Benton has got to be the winner, really. And I've played more expensive Harley Benton LPs than this, and they play nicely as well. So there we go. Interested to know what you think. What's your opinion? Which one do you like the look of? Obviously, this is a relic-y kind of one. If you could tell the difference on the sound, and again, apologies, this amp's not great, and the settings on it aren't great, but what did you think about those? And yeah, I'd be interested to hear what people have got to say. So that's it. Thanks for watching. Rich out.